Welcome back again. We are going to sum up Module 4 by going over our last lesson, Lesson 11, which is on printmaking. Alrighty. Okay. So printmaking, you may have been familiar with drawing and painting. Printmaking might be a new medium for you, though, that you haven't had much experience with yet. I'm going to go over some of the printmaking processes and different types of printmaking and just kind of give you an overview of what printmaking has to offer. So just to get some basic vocabulary out of the way, a print is the name for one of a series of nearly identical pieces, usually printed on paper. This is one of the most accessible forms of art because of its lower price, and it has a wider distribution possibility as well. Essentially, what we're looking at with printmaking is not an individual work, but a set of works that are made from the same thing. Over here, I've got the Marilyn Monroe print by Andy Warhol. This is obviously the product of one image over and over again. And so it creates this it's easier for production for more quantity of equal quality, I would say. But it's not like a painting or a drawing where there's only one of them that exist. So going on to some more terminology within printmaking, all prints are made from what we call a matrix. This is what is used to carve into. Usually it's a slab of metal, wood, or stone. We also see linoleum as another material as well. But essentially a matrix is it's what so if you have your wood block or you have your stone, whatever it might be, you're essentially carving your design into that piece of material, and that will translate later to your actual print itself. So it starts off with more of a sculpture process, I guess, sculpture and drawing combined in a way, because you're carving, but you're also drawing. An addition is a group of images created from the same matrix. They're often numbered, which indicates the sequence of the pulled prints. So you're making it from the same matrix. You're not making 10 or 12 or however many blocks. You're pulling it all from the same matrix. So the first print would be indicated that it is the first print by saying it's number 1. Sometimes this is important because it might have more ink applied to it, but it's just to let us know that was the first one that was rolled through the print press. Additions I consider to be like siblings. They're coming from the same matrix, but each one has a little bit of a unique quality to it. So whether it's that you change the color or, the print press pressed down a little bit harder, or there was a little bit more ink, they're all coming from the same image, but they can all be translated a little bit different each time. Here's an example of addition. It's all this sort of windmill shaped thing, but they're all a little bit different. So what are some reasons to make prints? They are, like I said, less expensive than paintings or sculpture, so they can be purchased by a wider group of viewers. They're an easy way to influence social change via wide distribution in comparison to unique works of art. And there's just a fascination with the process and with the craft of printmaking. It's very unique to a lot of other types of mediums. But yeah, early on with prints, we would print things that, were different for different social reasons, different political reasons, in order for it to be distributed widely. Really, the one of the first things that was actually wanted to be print were Bibles. Bibles were something that almost every person wanted. A lot of people could not read at the time that this was first printmaking was first coming into existence. But a Bible was something that a lot of people wanted during that time period. And so printmaking made that possible. Instead of having someone hand write a Bible, they could now print the Bible. So let's get into some types of printmaking. Our first one, and probably the most introductory type of printmaking, is relief printmaking. This is can be found in a lot of our everyday encounterings, such as fingerprints, rubber stamps, and wet tires. They are all examples of relief printmaking. They have a matrix to them. So your fingerprint, for example, if you look at it, you'll see that there are parts of your fingerprint that are more raised, and then there are parts of your fingerprint that are more sunken in. And so those parts that are raised, or the matrix, is the part that is going to show up when you go to do your fingerprint. So the process, the artist creates a matrix by cutting away and leaves the design in relief. So here's an example of how relief printmaking will work. You've carved away all the areas that have this like horizontal line to it on the top there. And then the areas that are the black solid parts have been inked, and that's the parts that have not been carved away. Relief printing can be kind of complicated because of the use of negative space. So essentially think about it like everything that you don't want to show up in the piece is the part that you're actually going to be working with. So if you are, let's say, for example, trying to carve or create a relief print of a cat, you want to carve out everything that is around the cat, but not actually the cat itself, just like they've done here. So they wanted those darker areas there to be what transfers onto the paper. And the areas that have been carved out are not going to receive any of the ink and are going to be white. There's two different main types of relief printmaking. The first one is wood cutting. This lends itself to bold black and white contrast, does not easily lend itself to color because the ink wants to absorb into the wood itself. It's very difficult to achieve clean appearances due to the wood grain. It just from personal experience, woodblock printmaking or woodcut printmaking is one of the hardest mediums I've ever had to really mess with. It's very, very challenging, very, very difficult to get the result that you want. And it's very unforgiving as well. So imagine for a second you're trying to carve into a block of wood, and like, if the wood starts to splinter or the grain starts to like go against you, you could, ruin your whole print in just like a second, and, there wouldn't really be any going back. Woodcuts are limited to a couple hundred editions because they do deteriorate over time after being rolled through the print press for so long. And it's a very popular method in Japan from the 17th to 19th centuries. Japanese printmakers really did perfect this craft. They were really, really good at it, really good at the craftsmanship and the detail. And it's just very, very hard to get like good craftsmanship with wood cutting. And so to do so is really impressive. Our next type is lino cuts. Lino cuts are a lot easier than woodblock printmaking. They are much softer than woodcut, and they also do not have a wood grain to them. And so they don't you don't splinter when you're trying to carve in the direction of the wood. It's all the same. It's really like carving into like butter compared to doing wood. They do produce clean lines and sharp contrast. And again, the no grain can be cut equally with equal ease in any directions. Linoleum is like a rubber stamp. So like your rubber stamps that you see that, produce like the kind of same idea as relief printing are done in linoleum. Our next type we're going to talk about is intaglio. Intaglio is when the areas below the surface hold the ink. And the process for this, also just to feel like it's important to say that the intaglio is most oftentimes done on metal plates, not on wood or linoleum. So the process for it is that you have your metal plate and you etch onto the surface whatever you want your design to be. So you're no longer thinking about the negative space like you were in relief, you're thinking about the positive space. So once you carve your design into the metal plate, you then put ink over top the whole entire thing and then squeegee away the top. And in these little crevices, the ink will have like gone down into there, and it's like holding in those pockets. You then would dampen your paper. That's a really important part of this, is to make sure that your paper is damp so that it will be flexible enough to go into those grooves that are holding the ink. And then once it's rolled through, it goes inside of those little crevices and picks up the ink, and you have your design. A characteristic of intaglio is that you can oftentimes see the plate marks of the actual roller itself because of how it wrinkles into those little crevices and whatnot. I'm going to attach an intaglio process video. You don't, well, actually, this is a graded Edpuzzle, so you do need to watch the intaglio process. It'll be linked into the Edpuzzle folder. Alrighty, our image I've got here, this is another slide identification on our final exam that I always like to show, just so you're familiar with it. It is also an example of an etching, an intaglio print. This is Albert Dreyer's Adam and Eve, and it's a pretty easy slide identification because this is clearly a picture depicting Adam and Eve. We've got the like little leaf loincloth things. You've got the snake and the apple. You've got Adam and Eve. It's a pretty easy slot identification, but it is kind of interesting to see this piece and how much detail is able to be achieved compared to the relief printmaking. It's almost like a drawing, but it is a print. It's done from a matrix, and you could print more than one of these. Lithography is our next type we'll talk about. I'm going to have you watch the lithography process video as well. It'll be linked into our Edpuzzle folder, but I want to give like a brief, just like Cliff Notes version of what lithography is. So essentially you are just putting down ink onto your stone, and then, or a painting, or, you know, whatever it is you would want to do. And then you put your paper over top of that and then roll it through the print press or squeegee it on top. If you are someone who is inclined more to painting than drawing, lithography is the process for you. If you're someone who is more drawn to drawing than painting, then Intaglio would be for you, if that kind of helps you separate it. Lithography, because the surface must remain intact, lithography stones or plates can be reused. So you can make multiples of these over time. And it really lent itself well to like the early 1800s. It was very much a painterly process, and a lot of artists used it to create posters from. There's a very like Art Nouveau sort of style about it. And a lot of people were surprised that these were actually prints and not paintings, because they had such a painterly quality to them. This is a piece by Henry de Toulouse-Lautrec, who he was very popular in France as a lithography artist. He used bright colors and flattened compositions and pioneered a new style of lithographic poster. This is a very large piece as well, and he used very innovative compositions to advertise for theater and music groups and things like that. Okay, this one's a little bit less conventional. You oftentimes probably wouldn't think about this as being a printmaking method, but it definitely is. There is a transfer process that's involved. It's the stencil. A stencil is a sheet with a design cut out of it, and then you paint over it, and it transfers the design to the picture plane. This is a favored way of making art by street artists such as Banksy. If you're not familiar with Banksy, he's a whole big character, or she or they or whoever they are, they're anonymous. The reason that the stencil screen printing is so popular with street artists is because it can be done so quickly. So nowadays, you know, the street art is like more widely accepted, and, you know, people actually like pay people to create murals and to create graffiti onto their businesses and whatnot. But a long time ago, or not that long ago, but, you know, 30 years or so ago, before it kind of gained this popularity, people were, you know, criminals for doing graffiti and, you know, in places that they weren't supposed to, which that is still a crime. Don't, you know, just go do graffiti wherever you want to unless you have permission to do it. But it was very much not a sought after thing. And so people would put their stencils up and then, you know, be able to spray it really quickly with their spray paint and then take it down real quick and then run away. It wasn't, you know, it was more about what was done outside of the actual like place that it was made rather than like when it was there. So like a stencil like this, for example, this was all created somewhere else. They cut out the stencil and they just brought the stencil, taped it to the wall, sprayed it real quick, took it down, and then, you know, ran away. So it's a very quick method of creating artwork with. Screen printing, also known as silk screen, is traditionally done on silk, but it has been done on paper nowadays as well as other types of fabric. This is when you adhere a stencil to a screen, and then a rubber-edged blade or squeegee pushes ink through the fabric in open areas of the stencil. So imagine here, this is like our setup here. You've got your frame over top your paper, and you've got your stencil here. So let's imagine for a second that we just have a piece of paper over top of this with a circle cut out in the middle. Once you squeegee that ink over the top of it, the circle is the only thing that will receive the ink. The paper is blocking the rest of it. So that's the way that screen printing setup sort of works. Alrighty, and lastly, screen printing, there is no reversal of the image as in other printmaking processes, which this is an important characteristic of screen printing as well, and just printmaking in general. Obviously, when you do the print, it's going to be the reverse of whatever is actually on the stamp. So that's like a lot of the times when you see stamps, especially that have letters on them, the letters are backwards, because when you actually go to stamp it, It's the reversal of whatever the stamp actually is. Same thing here. But with screen printing, that is not something that happens because you are only going in one direction. There's no like transferring of the image. It's all going straight through in one line. It lends itself well to poster production also, and many social activists use screen printing and other forms of printmaking to help spread their messages. I've got a video for us by Fabiana Rodriguez and her printmaking process and how printmaking has led her to be a part of a lot of social movements and also advocate for the different social happenings that she is passionate about. So watch that video. Please watch the other 2 videos as well on Intaglio and Lithography, and that summarizes our printmaking lesson. So this is the end of Module 4. We will continue back in Module 5, talking about our last mediums that we'll cover in this course. And yeah, just make sure you watch all the videos in the Ed Puzzle folder, and I will talk with you soon.